Episode number 130.
Yeah, look at that.
Agency exposed. How are you, gentlemen?
Oh,
Mr. Lander's hat, for those who can't see it.
do you guys know what Landers is?
No.
It's like a little kitschy place that, like, it's a little store. That
Local?
No, it's in Southern California.
Is it like a mini Buc-ee's?
No, it's not that kind of store. It's like a kind of a millennial, younger people. They have all these funky stuff in there. I don't know.
Cool.
Anyways,
Like that.
it's
kinda
it's like
got
a
a retro vibe
It's like
to it.
clothing and stuff. It's my daughter got it for me for.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, we went there when I was visiting one time, and
Like skateboard type stuff? A little bit?
kind of. It's more like what's the store down in the Gulch? That
Oh, I know what you're talking about. Urban Outfitters, kind of like
kind of
that
like an
vibe.
Urban Outfitters, but a little kind of cooler and more small,
Landers.
smaller and kind
Free
of funky.
advertisements
Yeah.
for Landers.
It's not quite stuff like it's not stuff brought in from China. It's kind of
Well, that's good.
really
Cool.
highly procured kind of things, and
Yeah, I like
a
that
little
stuff.
surfer, but really kind of more. I don't know.
So curated fashion.
Yeah, curated fashion, I guess.
Nice.
You'd call it.
Nice.
Nice. How
I
are you
like
guys
it.
doing?
We're doing great. Ready to go.
Yeah,
Ready to rock and roll?
yeah.
Okay, so today I thought we could, and I know we've talked about this a little bit before we push record, is you and I, meaning Ken and Brad, we all live in a creative space, even though we're also business people, and not all of our hours, waking hours, are working on creative things. It's a lot of business. But one of the things that has become second nature for me, and I know you guys as well, is continuing to connect dots as the years go by, continuing to think creatively, trying to stay current, and all of these things are elements of creative thinking, right? It's what people pay us for as agency owners and as creatives, and as marketers, as advertisers. We create things, and we help the client to understand how they can do things better by thinking outside of the box. But one of the things that I know we've talked about this, and I've run into people, I think it's starting to change in the last few years, but there seems to be a prevailing opinion that there's creative people that do creative things, and there's logical, analytical people that do logical and analytical things. And we're just kind of this, you're either one or the other. There's also prevailing opinion that for years and years that artists and creative people aren't good at business, and or you don't want to encourage your kids, for the most part, just to be an artist. You want to say, you need to have a backup, so go get a business degree, right? All of this kind of breeds this atmosphere that, again, I think is starting to change in the last few years, and we're going to unpack all of that today. So the question is, does being creative make you a better business person? And then I would take it a step further and say, does being creative and learning how to think creatively, is it essential for success? So those are the two questions.
Yeah, that's a great question. We talked about, obviously this is an extension of like last episode, we dug into sort of like some of the nuances of those two sides. Clearly, you need to be very creative to be successful at business, right? Like anyone would probably agree with that. I think the challenge is that even when we're practically selling creative type services, the challenge is that oftentimes it's like, yeah, that's great, but how do I make money? And I wonder if, I don't know how you guys have handled that. I would say I've done quite a bit of work on, because I'm sort of like, I care a lot about making money, and I like creativity, and I think leveraging creativity in making money and driving a business and creating products is what we all do. But there's something really interesting about the creativity part. You can almost make something more valuable out of thin air. That's what I think is really interesting about it.
Unpack that a little bit.
Well, like
okay.
just like
I'm
literally magically.
I'm curious.
Well, I find it fascinating.
Getting into NFTs now.
Well, that's a great example, right? It's
Right.
like there's nothing practical there.
Right.
That's sheer creativity, right? That's
Right.
visual creativity. But what I just think and we've talked about this a little bit before, but in my business and in all the brands that I work with, I've been for years unpacking this idea, or just exploring this idea of, it's so interesting to me how you can use creativity, right? And you can have one product widget A, right? And how you build the brand and how you can either sell that thing, right, on features and benefits, like really practical stuff, or you can also leverage creativity to build the brand, and build the value using words, using visuals, using information, all of which is like not tangible stuff. You can't touch it. It doesn't actually have a cost of goods. It does from the standpoint of like human resources and time. But my point is from the standpoint of cost as like a product cost, it doesn't have that. Yet you can increase the value of that thing, the perceived value of that product. Really, I actually believe somewhat exponentially, like clearly there's a ceiling, but I think you see a lot of examples where that gets increased exponentially. Like NFTs are a good example of that. And so that's why I think creativity is so powerful and actually so practical, because when leveraged correctly, it actually drives practical business elements. Like let's say, one of the primary moats to a business would be their brand, right? But how often is it, at least in the past, I think, where you have to explain why it's so important to build a brand when you're trying to build a business, right?
I've been building brands for companies, gone through multiple, multi-million-dollar brand shifts for larger organizations in my past career. Some have done really well, and others, were kind of dictated to us from the C-suite, thinking that was going to fix something. But one of the things that I always say is, your brand is not your logo. It's not your brand colors. That's not a brand. A brand is a promise, and a promise is elevated and expressed through the creativity. And so it's deeper. It's the core. And so, for instance, General Motors went through a rebrand of their logo. I don't know, maybe in the last 3 or 4 years. I don't know if you've seen their transition, because they had an uppercase G and uppercase M, and they went to a lowercase G and lowercase M. And the reason why they did that is because of their new forward thinking. They're pushing electric vehicles. And they thought, well, we're going to create an idea that we're going to change. And the change is going to be attached to this idea that our thinking now is changing, that we're thinking more electrifying vehicles and all that stuff. The reality is it got pushed back. People didn't like it. They thought the lowercase felt wimpy, because the problem is that they made a promise, but their cars, they didn't put the energy into their cars. Like, it's not like you're thinking of General Motors like, man, they are the number one electric vehicle company in the world. Right. They're not. Ford is better. Tesla's obviously blowing it out. They're not. That's Rivian. That's not General Motors. Right. But the problem is that they're trying to make a promise, and so the creativity, some designer proved to them, or somebody proved to them that this thing was going to work. And it doesn't always work. And so, I think the struggle is, how do you prove to your clients, when you're pitching creative, when you're pitching these ideas of these thoughts and change, because creative comes from a need of change, or a need of strong promising, right? We're making promises. And how does somebody, take that and then execute something creatively to actually expose that, so there's a return on investment for it? And how do you measure return on investment from the creative side? because it's key. It's all about financials. I mean, it's the creative and financials. I mean, we don't create to be creative in our industry. We create to make money, right, or to communicate something. So I think that's always the challenge. Is like, I think it's how you look at creativity too, and how you address the need and the challenge, I guess, and how you address it. And that's always very challenging because sometimes you don't hit it on the mark.
That's really interesting because the story that you just told, I don't know the details of it, to be honest with you. But oftentimes that can happen when, an outside person is saying, hey, we've got to be like these companies or these companies, and so we're going to be like this. But the point is about the promise that you mentioned, like, that has to come from within and be really genuine.
Correct.
And then, as long as the promise is genuine, then you get creative around how you say that in different ways and what that maybe means in different ways.
Yeah.
But the promise itself has to be like, we really are this, and we want to be this, and we really care about it.
Yeah.
And who's done that really well in the last 20 years is Apple. They made promises that change your life, and they're also very creative at it. So, it's not putting lipstick on a pig. And that's kind of, some companies they use creativity to put lipsticks on a bunch of pigs. And they think that's going to fool everybody. It's not, and it doesn't.
Yeah. I think I want to unpack what you both are saying. And I think it's a illustration of how we open this podcast, is that brand can't stand on its own. And the people that create the brand are usually the creatives, right? So that brand, if it's not backed up with the logistics and the business and the practical and the product and how that product is executed and how the people around that product are executed, then the brand has no value at all, right? So what you're talking about is Apple said, we're going to change your life and we promise this. If they didn't deliver on that and they put out crappy products that weren't reliable or they broke or whatever, then, but that is all about business and supply chain and logistics and everything. So when you have that disparity of a lack of business acumen with your creativity, you have disaster. And I would say the vice versa is true too. If you have a really great product, but you don't have the creative brand behind it, then you have the same disparity that, hey, I have a great product, but nobody trusts it because the brand doesn't reflect it.
Correct. And I think a person at Johnny Ives, I'm familiar, he was the chief designer for Apple for years. He actually started early on with Steve Jobs, and Steve and him really had a good connection. And he was the one who designed the iPods, all of the, so there was cool functionality as well, but the design was so crucial. I mean, when you can put, people walking around with just a white box on their chest and white things in their ear, you can't even see what it is, and you recognize it so well, that's good. Like, that's good branding. But the quality of the product and the uniqueness of the product also stood on its own feet. So it's that promise, that's that total promise that makes design beautiful, right? And I think it's a good example of what Apple has done now. Well, I don't know in the future what they're going to be like because Johnny's no longer there with them. So,
yeah, they say the best promise wins, not the best product wins, right? Like, that's a pretty common marketing saying.
Can I write that down?
It's not mine.
Can you say that again?
But the point is like, you can, like, to what you guys were just saying, like, if you make the best promise, that's what's going to make people actually take action.
Yeah.
And if your product doesn't back it up, of course it has to.
But it's not just a promise.
Disaster.
It's actually fulfilling that promise.
Correct. Right.
Let's take it down to a real practical level, to individual personal life. That's great. Okay, understand big picture, Apple, great product, great brand, but how does this type of thinking and way of being in our lives make us better at, I would argue, anything? But let me give you an example. I talk to so many people at our age, Brad and Ken. You're a little bit behind us, but you're rapidly catching up.
I know, faster than I think.
That are in a phase of life where they haven't been able to grow and expand and be creative and think creatively about their lives, their skills, what they're good at, what they can do, how they can grow with the changing world and culture and technology. And so they're stuck because of a lack of creative thinking. And there are other people, I would argue, maybe like us, maybe people even more successful than us, that seem to zig when everyone else is zagging, whose career path looks like some kind of crazy spiral, mixed up mess, while this guy over here who's struggling is on a very straight, linear path. What is it about that? How is that different and unique? Because I know, Ken, you're a pretty analytical guy, but you're also a very creative guy. And Brad, I think I think all three of us have that kind of interesting quality. But what is it about being pliable, being willing to maybe think a little differently?
Yeah. I struggle a lot with that through my career. And let me tell you what it is that what I've found is creatives. So when you're looking at building, let's say, a brand persona for a brand, right? And you're putting creative in it, that brand persona is different. A different person than you are, or a different person than your designers are. They're all different.
Or than your customers.
Or than your customer is, right?
Like your client.
Yes. Yeah. They're different. But the challenge that I've always seen is that a lot of creatives, they fight with that persona because what they want to do is fulfill the creativity of their own persona.
Right.
They don't know how. This is what they're trying to fulfill, something deep inside themselves, where they have a hard time connecting with that other person, persona, brand. They don't know exactly what that person is when they talk. They don't understand it deep enough. One of the things, I think I told the story before, I had a copywriting class and we had to come up with an overnight campaign. We almost all did overnighters just to get it done. This guy forced us to. He was a top copywriter at JWT, J. Walter Thompson. We had a lot of instructors because I grew up in an ad town. And we did this, and he was so rude to us. He would cut down our pieces. He literally took another student and ripped up her script right in front of her, and she started crying. Like, it was abusive. We're like, who is this jackass? Yeah. But then he stopped and he said, this was done purposely. He said, don't ever get connected to your work that deeply that you cannot, because what happens is you will create based on yourself, on your lacks, on your needs, on your stuff, not what the persona, not what the client. So you're not serving the client, you're serving yourself. And I never forgot that. And
that's a great lesson and metaphor for life.
Yeah. It is. Mm-hmm. It is.
But it's also the balance.
Yeah. The guy was still a jackass.
Yeah, right.
But,
exactly.
And it was abusive. Like today.
But what a great teacher.
But yes, he taught me something I will never forget.
He was very kind. Because
Yes.
he lets you think he's a jackass to teach you something. Right?
Correct.
Seriously. Like he sacrificed his reputation.
Yeah. And
to teach you something.
But the thing is, as I've gone through my career, I've seen it so much firsthand. And it's the inability for creative people to number one, have empathy. Even for a non-human, it's hard to have empathy for a non-human. That's hard. Mm-hmm. It's hard to have empathy for a company or an organization that has a persona. That's really hard. It's hard for people to have empathy for a human.
Yeah.
But I think the ones who actually are able to do that are the ones who are able to now step back and go, I care enough about this person, this brand, that I'm going to actually not look inward as much and try to create something that's going to fulfill me. I'm not going to it may not be fun. Creative sometimes is not fun, right? It's not going to be about me having all this great time. Oh, I get to do this and design this, and it's going to be fun. I'm going to choose the colors that I like and all that stuff.
That is a creative for creative sakes approach.
Correct.
And that's a really a good point that you hit on, because in order to make it practical, to sell it, to drive business results, to do those kind of things, you've got to leverage creativity and channel it into something very intentionally. And that
Yes.
takes a lot of discipline and work.
Yes, and it does. It takes a lot of discipline, and it takes a lot of work up front. Like, a lot of people, what I've seen is they just start right away on like the computer and start designing stuff, and I'm like, slow down, create some strong guardrails first. Understand what you're designing. It's like you're trying to design a house, but you don't have the plans in front of you yet. Like you're just trying to like start nailing stuff and getting boards up and everything, and like slow down. It's like the work is actually done way before you start. That's where the work's done. The implementing is the easy stuff,
Yeah. Yeah. And again, I'm going to keep pushing back on the practicality of it. Like, I think that's a great analogy, and it's a great lesson for anyone in life. It's like we get so attached to whatever our own personal needs or whatever. It could be a career path. It could be a profession. It could be a way of looking at the world that we think we're stuck in that because for whatever reason, it meets a need, or we think this is the way it has to be done. This is the way my dad did it and the way I have to do it. And thinking creatively says, truly creative says, what if we didn't do it that way? What if we turned the whole thing upside down? What if we broke the norms? What if we looked at it this way? What if we looked at it that way? What if we changed the color? So thinking like a creative is applicable to everyone because we're all born creative.
Yeah.
I don't buy the thing that says, well, I'm just not creative.
Yeah.
Every child colors, every child builds, every child spends their day daydreaming and role playing, right? But somewhere along the way that gets beat out of us.
Yeah.
And I'm not talking literally in our education system or in whatever. And we kind of flip that switch and go, okay, now I'm going to do this. And that's okay. We're all on a different spectrum of that level of creativity. But I think there's a real value in waking up and going, hey, I don't have to just do it this one way. And I think that's the value that people come and pay us for.
Correct.
But everybody can benefit from that.
If I hear one more time that something creatively was chosen, colors were chosen because they think that's the fad next year or something like that, it's going to drive me crazy because I'm like, why would you base what
you like my jacket? It's the current color this year.
It's one thing in designers. You got to have a lag. I mean, there is a lag, and you've got to, as a fashion designer, maybe you got to try to identify what's going to be hot, and I get that part. But when it comes to true creativity, if you're making your creative decisions on some fad, you're obviously not inventing,
right?
Right? And you're choosing to look at something else that is completely not related to the actual challenge and what we really are doing. You're thinking it's just an easy cop out, right? From then being inventive and understanding, no, what is going to be the best colors for this, for my customers, for this, for purpose. It has nothing to do with a fad.
Well, that's it. Yeah. Again, I'm gonna go back to the personal. Again, great lesson. What is it about you as a human being that is uniquely you, that only you can provide and give to the world? And I think that's what we're ultimately talking about, right?
Correct.
It's like we get back to this thing that is, you can try to copy other people and what's popular or jump on the AI wagon, but what can you uniquely bring to the conversation? And I think that's the key to,
every time we do, you guys are talking, I'm just keep thinking.
I've got a couple things I would like to share with that, but go ahead.
No, I'm on that point. So like the finding what's unique to you, we call them superpowers. Like I here in Medicake, and we've even had I think our first episode was what's your superpower as an agency. Anytime we do any branding service or work, which is actually our first step in like a foundation path that we have for how you grow an e-commerce brand. So anytime we do a brand hand-holding exercise work, we dig deep into it. The number one thing we're looking at, or one of the things we're looking at, is what are your unique not value propositions, but what is like uniquely advantageous to you? Like, what are the things that are unfair advantages that you have in the marketplace as a business? And I think that you think about that personally as well, right? Because everyone has unfair advantages, and a lot of times your unfair advantage is the thing that you think is the thing that puts you behind other people. So an example in business might be like, well, I'm really small, I'm only one person. So that actually can be an unfair advantage that you have, right? Because you're more nimble, you may have a lower cost structure. But so personally, I think you have to think that way. And I think you even think about that really from a business strategy standpoint. That's one of the key pieces that you have to figure out as well. What are my unfair advantages as a business? You're going to say something, Brad. So
Oh, no, I was just saying that, getting down to a real personal point of view is that you have to have really strong conviction as a creative. And the conviction isn't that I created this and this thing's awesome and it's perfect. And if you don't love it, you're stupid, you're crazy, right? Yeah. Like, that's not what the conviction is. That's called arrogance and pride. You have to have enough conviction to say, this isn't serving my customer. And what we've created it's halfway there, but it's not fully there. And it's not fully baked yet. Where everybody else it's fully baked. It's awesome. It's incredible. It's the best thing ever. I want to pet it and hold it and caress it and everything. No. You got to keep on. And it's that conviction, I think, that I've seen in multiple, not my career, not just my career, but other people who are really good. It's that conviction to know, they know that what will actually, when they hit the mark, and they'll know what serves. And not only that, they'll be able to express to the client exactly why it's going to serve them and why other things won't as well. And they'll use data, they'll use logical things that will take anybody who is a CFO who doesn't care about creative, just cares about the numbers, that can easily see. But it's that conviction, and it's not pushing, it's not pushy, it's not prideful. It's just, and it's basically of a care and a love for that customer. It's like, I love you enough that I'm going to tell you the truth. I love you enough that I'm going to tell you the truth. And here is the truth. It's called create. This is what we created, and it's the truth. And but yet it's, what I'm saying, it's not out of your own pride.
So like, how do you guys it's interesting. Like everything is creative. Like if you're in an organization and you're like, like, I don't know why I'd pay for like a rebrand or like a deep dive or something like that. You got to realize that your business exists out of creativity, right? Like the entire thing that you're in was at some point a vision of somebody that then was creative enough to create it and then brought it into reality. So it's a product of that. So it's inherently why you're there, and it's so valuable to keep figuring that out, especially if you have decline or you've got competitors coming into the market. Like, that is the time to do those things. Yet there always seems to be some barriers there.
Yeah.
So I'm curious, like, well, are there some tactics or strategies that you guys have used to get people to understand the value of those creative services? That could be getting into brand and unpacking, like deep diving into what are the promises, what matters, and then actually even maybe visually rebranding things. That could be, advertising or something like that. But when it comes to creative services that I would say are not right next to the money, right? There are services that we provide that are like literally, contributing 1-to-1 or right next, really close to the revenue. Creative services are removed from the revenue directly, so they're more indirect. How do you sell those? Any tactics or thoughts or strategies or anything like that?
I think for me personally, the way that I have sold those, when a client comes and says, we just need to sell more product, right? One of the first things I do is I try to look at the whole picture and say, well, you don't have a product problem, you have a brand problem, or you don't you don't have a product or you have a product problem, right? So that's a whole different issue.
Right.
But many times it's a marketing and messaging, and it's a communication problem. And I think people can understand that much easier. Like, we're immersed in brand and like words and languages that only people in creative agencies really, really understand. Like, if you take the guy on the street and say, "What's a brand?" "Oh, it's a logo. It's a swoosh on my shoe," right? That's what most people would say. We know when we love to talk for hours about what brand really is, right? Most people don't really think that way. So when you're talking to a prospective client, I don't think you can go into that, because all they think is, "Oh, I got to spend another $50,000 to change my logo," right? I think you have to start talking to them on things in a language they understand, which is, you're not communicating effectively either the wrong message, or you're speaking to the wrong people. And there's ways that I can come in and help you communicate better. I can help you reach and look at your demographics, psychographics, all your data, and help connect those dots to communicate to the right people. So I try to take that approach. And then when I start to win their understanding and their trust, then I start saying, one way to communicate is in colors. Another way to communicate is in logo. That might be the situation. Another way is in what digital channels that you're talking to the right demographic people. So I always approach it from a communication perspective, because people understand. Most people understand that, and you're kind of on a level playing field. And if you can reinterpret branding, marketing, strategy, all of that, and put it into common language of communication, I think you're on. That's how you can sell that a lot better.
Yeah, that's good.
That's good.
We take our clients that when we're looking at like our creativity, we take them through a typical process that we are really unpacking their business, unpacking how what is the journey of their customers, and what are the points of the communication that are really important for them, and who are they interacting with? If they're interacting with their brand, they're interacting with a person, really. And how does that feel for them? And is it the feeling that the company really wants? And I think we go through that process. We build guardrails, so we understand who they are and who they're not. And we get the buy-in from C-level to make sure that they're bought into that. And we find ourselves that we actually, a lot of times when we do these like workshops, we find that we have some C-levels they always get in arguments because they're not on the same page. But it's the first time ever that they've actually been pushed enough to ask these questions, and they find out they're not on the same page, and they have to kind of work it out. And I'm kind of like a mediator sometimes when I do these workshops, because I'm like, well, we got to figure this out because we're stuck. You guys don't think alike. If it's a CFO and a CEO or whatever, right? Head of operations and whatever it is, right? And so, doing that and going through that and understanding deeply their customers and what their customers really want from them, and what they and actually, if you can get data that shows what they think of them already, that's also very important.
Yeah.
Because it just kind of lays out where the damage is, because there's damage already. A large company's going to have a lot of damage because they haven't been singing the same song, right, in every single customer touch. So a customer may go through. In fact, Comcast had this problem, right? They've seen this shored up now, but everybody complained about 10 years ago. Comcast was evil. Like, they complained about the customer service. They complained. It was complain. They've kind of taken care of that now a little bit.
They went at that head on.
They did.
They did the Comcast Cares and the Twitter.
And
when no one was doing social media customer service,
remember ComcastSucks.com?
Yeah.
Do you remember that?
Yeah, I know. And so Comcast was trying to make a promise that they weren't keeping. That was the issue. They finally started making that promise, and people started having better customer service. They created a lot of technology just around that. They've poured into that.
Helps to change their name to Xfinity too.
Yes, and so the rebrand was probably helpful. That may have been out of that.
It's an odd name though.
Xfinity, yeah, it might have been out of that. So
I don't like it.
We did that actually with
You named Xfinity.
no, it was American Speedy.
It's your fault.
No, American Speedy Printing was a company, and they were having problems, and we rebranded them as
Allegra.
Allegra. You got it.
Yeah.
Allegra.
American Speedy Print.
Yes, that was the name, the original name. And we rebranded them as Allegra. And man, we made promises and we kept those promises. And it really helped them out. They expanded and they grew. And this was years ago. But so sometimes you have to, people associate certain things with your identity. And sometimes you have to kind of reinvent yourself. But if you reinvent yourself, it's not just changing a logo. The logo was the last thing we did. The name was the last thing we did. They had to rechange and make a promise that they had to organizationally keep.
I think that's where some people struggle is it takes time to do those things.
Yeah.
And it actually takes a lot of conviction and really investment and belief. Like Comcast didn't turn around in, it wasn't a 3-month ROI.
No.
It was like maybe 3 years, maybe 10-year ROI.
Yeah.
And so like there's, and so that the challenge a lot of times I think with selling some of these things is you have to get someone to believe it and to see the vision. They kind of at some level have to already believe and see it, because, I think that has to be at the core level. Like they kind of know something's wrong because they believe, and they're just looking for a guide. And when that guide comes and hits it, like they're able to take them. But we also have to find quick wins because I think that, you have to. I think that is one of the barriers to selling these type of services. Is okay. What is it going to do for me now?
I will tell anybody, if you are doing a creative project like a rebrand, and that's not the last thing that this company's doing, like they're not overhauling their product at the same time in the way they communicate and the way their customer service is. If they're not doing that, there's going to be a problem. Because the creative is not going to fix a thing. Not going to fix a thing. And so that is a first benchmark. How can, as a creative, bring not just a creative, but how can I bring a total solution so that the customer is getting not just my creativity, and it might be art, it might be logos, it might even be messaging, it might be really beautiful videos and all this stuff. But how am I changing the way that business is running? If I'm not bringing new ways to run that business along with it, right? Then I shouldn't be bringing the creative or whatever that is. It shouldn't come by itself. It should always come with, hey, we want to launch this brand new program. It's going to take $3 million. We're going to put more energy. We're going to put some more call centers together. We're going to get more people in there. And by the way, we're going to rebrand it. That's secondary. The branding part is the last thing. It's the creativity comes for how am I going to go into a business and help them reshape that business so the customers is super served. And that's where the creativity that's where your creative teams need to focus on. And then how do they express it is secondary to me.
Yeah, that's really, really good. Any other thoughts, gentlemen?
No, it's just I think it's a worthwhile area to pursue because there's just so much. I think there's a giant gap. I think a lot of people in the agency world try and sell creative services and fail. I think a lot of them try and sell creative services that are really good, but they can't convince the person, the company, that it's worthwhile. And so helping break that down and really be able to communicate value and what that value actually means in a business and what that value means to a business person who is not a quote, maybe inherently or doesn't see themselves as a creative person.
Yeah.
That skill I think is critical. I love what you said about like making it a communication thing or a conversion thing, right? Where it's like, let's put actual, like, let's find problems and like realize that some of these solutions are brand and creative related in how we message things. I mean, the bottom line is they all are. There are very few, at least when it comes to a revenue and a marketing problem, there are very few things that are not creative related. And by that, I don't mean just the visuals. I mean all of what we're talking about. And so I don't know. I think this is a kind of ongoing thing, but
Yeah.
I feel like there was a few things that I learned today. So
I would just say that if you could replace the word creativity with trust,
Yes.
all you're doing is creating trust. Even if it's cool, even if something's really designed cool, it's cool. It's trust. Just replace that word with I'm building trust. And what does that look like? You know?
Yeah. Another thing too, I would kind of wrap this up is another way to look at this. It went to answer your question. How do you translate the value of brand and sell it and et cetera? Is you had mentioned at the beginning that a brand is a promise. And
Yes.
that's true. Another way that I like to say it is, and I didn't originate this, but sometimes even saying that a brand is a promise can be a little disembodied and a little like ethereal, right? Many people understand that, and it's true.
Yeah.
Another way to say it is your brand is how you make someone feel.
Yes.
And I think that's something that everybody can understand.
Yes.
And so when you come at it like that, that's a strong proposition. Now, you have to deliver on that if you're going to rebrand it. But if you say to anybody sitting across the table, you have a communication problem, your customer base has changed, grown, it's a new generation, and you no longer make them feel the way that you used to make them feel.
Yes.
So what you need to do is make them feel the way that you want to make them feel in order to engage with your product, whatever
Yes.
it may be. So that's another way of saying it as well.
I've been using this in some of my business slides, but the quote from Maya Angelou, do you know
Yes,
that one?
I know exactly what you're saying.
Yeah, I can't quote it exactly, but it's people don't remember what you said or what you did; they remember how you made them feel, and it's so true. And if brands can pick that up and really truly understand it, I think you're right. That is the promise. How are you making them feel?
When they walk into your presence,
Yeah.
into a room, and everybody gets that, and everybody wants to make people feel good. Most people,
Yeah.
right? So anyway, good discussion, guys.
Great.
All right. Until next time.
Yes.
Talk to you soon. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.